Welcome to this absolutely special event that we've got today. Today on Diplomatic Passport, we start the week on a very, very fresh idea. And you shall be seeing us as we go deeper into an issue that touches our hearts the most, something that we've been pushing a lot on Diplomatic Passport, and indeed on a number of platforms here on Zimpaper's television network. This is Diplomatic Passport, and my name is Robin Kondiwa. Of course, before we start by giving you what we're going to be touching into the flesh today, let's start by seeing those statistics that we have as provided to us by the Ministry of Health and Childcare to see where Zimbabwe stands with regards to COVID-19. So, of course, we have been doing quite a great job as a country because at least we're staying at the 81% mark with regards to the statistics. So Zimbabwe now has 8,011 confirmed cases of COVID-19, including 230 deaths and 6,505 recoveries, which keeps that national recovery rate at 81%. Now, 527 PCR tests were done in the last 24 hours, and one new case was recorded. Now, this is a local transmission case. Harare, of course, is still the epicenter with 3,274 cases of COVID-19, followed by Bulawayo, which now has 1,504 cases of the novel coronavirus. Now, if you look at those statistics, Bulawayo has breached the 1,500 mark, now on 1,504, and of course, the nation has breached 8,000 because we are now on 8,011 cases. We need to continue being vigilant. We cannot be complacent. We cannot throw caution to the wind. And also, when we look at the statistics, we also see that we've only got one recorded case in the past 24 hours, which is a plus. But at slightly over 500 cases of PCR tests rather being done, we are below that 1,000 mark that we wanted. And as a nation, we are slacking. We need to keep testing. But I am absolutely elated to talk about a great day on our calendar, a day that we always observe here on Zimpaper's television network. And some of you will know that it was an International Day of the Girl Child over the weekend. Now, every year on October 11, the International Day of the Girl Child is commemorated, and UNICEF and partners work with girls to design and launch a year-long advocacy campaign related to their lived gender inequalities and demands for equal opportunities. Now, this year, while we face the global COVID-19 crisis, we seize the opportunity to reimagine a better world inspired by adolescent girls sharing their voice, their solutions, and under the theme, My Voice, Our Equal Future. Now, this year's International Day of the Girl has added significance as a key activation moment of the global generation equality movement, a multi-partner advocacy and action platform for bold new gender equality impact. Now, today in the studio, I'm joined by two ladies, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. It's your day. If you want to chuck me out, you're absolutely right to do so. And we're also going to be having another guest who's going to be joining us over the phone. And I'm glad that you have come here as the faces of femininity and powerful femininity at that. And of course, because we're talking about my voice, our equal future. I'll start with the young lady right next to me.
Hi, Robert. Thank you so much for having me here. So for those who are not aware, my name is Nicole Natsai-Chimanikire. I am a former junior councillor, former chief whip, which means head of discipline at Harare City Junior Council. I am now a youth advocate for about 4 or 5 years now.
Oh, brilliant.
For those who've forgotten, I'm 19.
Okay. And we do always love having you, and that's why we searched high and low for you, because we know you are that voice of discipline as well as the whip. And the lady.
Yes. So hi, Robert. Hi, Nico. My name is Catherine Marconi. I'm the gender specialist with UNICEF. And I'm happy to be in the company of powerhouses like Nicole and our partners like yourself.
Absolutely. I think it's incredible that you guys decided to join us. Yes. For those not in the know, of course, we are proudly sponsored by UNICEF who are always at the forefront of making sure that that important voice of women and girls is heard and pushing for equality for the 51%, because you are the bastion of our existence and our being. We've also got on the phone, we've got Maud Chifamba. People, I'm going to have her introduce herself and why she's that very important person, because some may have forgotten the person that she is, and we're going to be bringing her live on the phone. She's on standby. But before we get to Maud, I want to come back to you and say, why is this day absolutely significant for you? And you mentioned a portfolio that you hold at UNICEF. What does that entail?
Okay, so this day is absolutely important. I mean, every day as UNICEF, we work with children. So our mandate is to promote and protect the rights of children in Zimbabwe and among the over 150 countries around the world that we work in. So we do that on a day-to-day basis, and we work across a range of programs, from health, working with our colleagues in the Ministry of Health, Education, with our Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. We work with Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare around child protection issues. So this is our bread and butter. This is what we do every day. However, now and again, on days like the International Day of the Girl Child, it gives us the opportunity to stop, to reflect, to look at our progress, pat ourselves on the back, but also I think recommit, because we recognize there's still a ways to go. So a day such as the International Day of the Girl Child, which is celebrated every 11th of October every year, gives us an opportunity to kind of pause, reflect, recommit, and say, yeah, we are doing great work, but there's still a ways to go.
And I'll come to you and ask, this day, of course, UNICEF, as they say, their purview, their mandate is to look after the interests and the rights of children in general. But why, as a young woman, do you think it is absolutely pertinent that there should be a day particularly set aside for the girl in particular?
Okay, so when we talk about girls being on the forefront or empowering girls, there's always, and this has come really late, really recently, that talk where you're saying you're doing too much. We've heard this over and over again. But what people need to understand, and this is my personal perspective, is that it's an issue of culture. It's socialization. And when it's happened for years and years and years, remember, we have been a patriarchal society for decades, going on centuries and the like. And so for us to try and kind of redirect that narrative where we say that when a boy does something wrong, it's just boys will be boys. And when a girl does something wrong, we will beat you until, you know, you do the right thing. So for us to try and change that narrative is going to take a lot of time. So when we have days like this where everyone can stop and say, listen, this is what we need to do. We need to remember this is what we need to do. Then absolutely great, we're moving forward together.
Absolutely. Now, out there, Maud, I know you've just joined us telephonically. Welcome to the program, and just at least briefly introduce yourself so that people remember who you are and reconnect, and also tell us what's been happening ever since that first time we heard about you when you became this pop phenomenon, if it were, and the face of education around our country. Maud, if you can hear me, just go ahead and introduce yourself. And of course, if you're struggling, we'll always come back to you. But let's try just one more time and see if we can get a hold of you, Maud.
Okay. Hi, Robert.
Hey, how are you doing? Oh my goodness, I think we seem to be struggling, but of course we're going to come back to you, Maud, and we're obviously going to have you join the panel that I've got here in the studio. And of course, it's always a pleasure getting into contact with you. And of course, I'm going to make sure that I leave the introduction to her. She's actually absolutely a very, very special person, and she's really directed us as people. Now, talk to me about My Voice, Our Equal Future. What does What significance does that carry? Because I seem to be zeroing in on the word our equal future, equality. Why is that a very big issue, and why is it that that mantra that we're running with this year?
So I think it's a simple premise. It says if you give young girls a voice, if you allow them the opportunity, so young girls like Nicole, you heard how eloquent she is. Young girls like Maud, we all know Maud's story. So if you give them the opportunity, if you give them the voice, if you allow them to say their piece and participate effectively, we all stand to benefit. So our equal future is the vision that we have, where everyone is able to realize their full potential, boys and girls. But in the process, we all benefit. So we stand to gain a lot if we allow young girls their voice, if we allow young girls the opportunities that we give to boys, for instance.
And how do you claim your place in society when it seems you're coming from a society that favors one over the other? Where do you get that strength to say, you know what, I deserve an equal spot at the table, and I'm going to get what's mine? Because this is what you've been doing practically for most of your life, especially your life as an advocate.
I believe I was very blessed. I have a mother who's, she's something, to say the least. She's a very strong-willed woman who will say whatever needs to be said at the time that it needs to be said at. And so when I was growing up, it was always that situation where, by the way, I'm the only child in my family, right? And I'm a girl. And so there's always that situation whereby, you know, boys are supposed to be the firstborn so that they can carry on their line and then all of that stuff. But my mom was like, listen, you are a human being. You do what human beings do. All those boys, you can do what they can do. Not that you can do it better, but you can do what they can do. And I think that's one thing that really motivated me and put me on that platform. The courage that I had to do public speaking, to do all these things that I do. It was always my mom telling me, you can do it. There's no reason why you can't. And when there's that type of a background and a backbone for me, I don't think I could go anywhere else.
Absolutely. That's pretty, as you were saying, very inspiring and such a go-getter. And I believe we've got Maud back up again. Maud, if you could hear me once again, please just introduce yourself to the people who may have forgotten who you are as a person and as a personality, and tell me why this day is absolutely important for you as a person, again, as a personality.
Thank you, Rob. I'm happy to be back. I hope you can hear me now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, that's perfect then. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And just to introduce myself, as you can see, my name is Maud Famba. I am 23-year-old, chartered accountant designate. I'm an auditor. I'm an auditor. And how I'm largely known is because I am that girl that went to university at 14. And ever since there, I managed to get my first degree when I was 18. I proceeded to do my master's degree at the UZ as well. And then I did a bit of lecturing as well at the university, and then now I then settled into auditing. So in a nutshell, that is who I am. Aside from being a finance person, I'm very passionate about girls and education, because I truly believe education is one of the easiest ways that we can change people's lives and in that way change the world. And why the International Day of the Girl Child means a lot to me is because fortunately, I would say fortunately, because I have experiences of a girl that has been disadvantaged, that has been vulnerable at some point. And it is just important that people take time of the year, that one day of the year. I know we celebrate women, we have a Women's Month and everything, but it's very important that we take time and a day where we just consider girls as girls and look at the challenges that they face, which are peculiar to them just because they are girls, as we try to navigate a formerly patriarchal world that is turning up. Which in a good way, which is turning around to also accommodate the girl child, who has a lot of things to offer, but he hasn't been given the opportunity to actually demonstrate and to actually offer this to the world. So in a nutshell, that is why I think that the International Day of the Girl Child is important both to me and to girls in general.
Well, it's interesting you should say this, and it's also interesting that you are also, in accounting as an auditor. You went and read accounting, of course, for your first degree, and we always talk about how important it is to invest in girls, and how investing in girls and the education of girls is something that's absolutely important, because it will actually be cheaper for us to invest in a girl than to fix the problem. Because, for example, we've had situations where, imagine if, of course, there was a chairman's fund that helped fund your story, and you managed to then get a scholarship and go to university. But the alternative story that could have been the sad story would have been a young girl who's failed to go to school, has been forced into marriage, as our society always says, and then you've got 3 or 4 kids, and you cannot look after those children because nobody invested in you, and subsequently there are generations, a new generation you've created that you cannot sustain, and whose livelihoods you cannot sustain. But we came together as, of course, as a country, one of those rare moments that we come to get together and invest in girls. Why is investing in girls for you something that's absolutely important? Because you know the figures. Why is it important for a nation to invest in its women and in its girls?
So I need to just appreciate the way you just brought out my whole story of how I'm an example of a girl that was at some point disadvantaged, but then the whole nation came together, and I got scholarships, some of the things that I never really expected to get, really. And then that has pushed me into then becoming who I am now. To answer your question, where I think, there's a thing that says poverty begets poverty. And if you child, there's also another saying that says, if you educate a woman, you educate the world. Because what then happens is when a girl is not given opportunity to go to school, sometimes they find themselves in the systems like child marriages, for example, where it's not like somebody came through and said, you know what, you need to get married to this one. Yes, there are those cases as well. But where a girl is not given the opportunity to grow in terms of their career, in terms of their potential, of what they can offer, they then tend to then offer other things. Like, for example, that's where you see people getting caught up in early marriages. I have cousins. So for me, my story is not even divorced, where you have to think hard to say, if this girl didn't go to school, what could have happened? I have cousins who get married at 14, 15, and they're getting married to older men, because definitely for a man, for you to get married, you need to be able to provide. But then if you're a woman, they just say, in these rural areas where I am from, the moment you hit puberty, you are somehow ripe for marriage. And then you get into a marriage, and all you know is being ripe for marriage. So what you then turned to then teach to your children, and what they will teach to their children, is the concept of, as a girl, all you can offer is to be ripe for marriage. So there is absolutely no way we can then change the world or change the narrative of most girls in situations like that without educating and empowering the first girl. Because definitely for me, if I'm going to then have my own child, I'm not going to just push the narrative of you have to be ripe for marriage, because while marriage is good, having children is good, I know there is so much more that I as a girl, I as a woman, when I become a woman, there is so much that I can then learn, that I can offer to the world, that is not just me being ripe for marriage. And the good thing is, with empowering a woman, you tend to see that empowering a woman gives her options. Empowering a girl gives them options to decide who they truly want to be. You can, when you're educated, you can then decide, you know what, my calling is to be a mom. I want to be a stay-at-home mom. That choice is yours, and it's sort of, because you have options, you are not prone to abuse, one. And two, you can also teach your kids other things that are not just them being ripe for marriages or being taken advantage of in the society that we live in. So I do think it's absolutely important that we invest more in educating a girl, because the girl is going to become the woman tomorrow, who's going to have children tomorrow, and who's going to actually shape the future of the children that they have, and then in turn this will then shape the way our world turns out and how it runs.
Well, Maud, it's been very intriguing having you here, and I have no clue what you were doing studying towards accounting at the age of 14. I was busy running around and being a nuisance at that age. And of course, if you think you're bored stiff by accounting or auditing anytime soon, you're a very strong advocate, and you could even go for that politics degree because you're a very passionate speaker on issues to do with policy. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really hope that we're going to be having more and more conversations around this issue, a very important issue, and perhaps even have you here in studio one day, because we really like that fire and that passion.
Thank you so much, Robert. Sometimes it's hard to not have the passion, because I'm not talking about things I've read. About things I have experienced.
Absolutely.
And things I have seen. So thank you so much for inviting me to the platform. And definitely, I will be in the studio very soon.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, you heard that. For a moment, though, I thought it was you on the other end of the line, because the fire, good Lord, the fire is just exactly the same. But drawing on her experiences and what she's gone through, she's a beautiful story, and yet she's very, very close. She's also had a front row seat to the failures, to those stories where society failed a girl, and she's talking about very, very close people also being forced into early marriage and commoditizing themselves and thinking, you know what, how do I survive the next day? Let me make myself a beautiful commodity and sell myself to the next person. And this is sad how in the same society, in the same breath, in the same family, we're talking about very different things juxtaposed right next to each other.
It's very sad indeed, and it's one of the things that absolutely infuriates me, because as in my walk as a junior counselor, you would go into your ward and you're talking to the girls, you're talking to the boys as well, and you realize I'm trying to do this and advocate for this, but at the same time that I'm advocating, the process is not happening fast enough to get to the people that I'm advocating on behalf of. And it's so irritating, even if you bring those people to the floor and say, speak, again, they speak, but it seems like no one is listening at the end of the day. And this is where you realize that as much as we advocate and we talk and we talk and we talk, if there's no action behind it, we are not going anywhere. And unless we say that it's not up to this particular sector, it's not up to the government, it's not up to this organization, it's not up to UNICEF alone, it's not up to Plan International alone, nor any embassy, it's up to me, myself. I have an aunt, I have a mother, I have a cousin, I have a little cousin sister. All those people that I have influence around, if I can say that I'm pushing one step forward, just one conversation about the things you can do in life can push someone to the next level. Just one, oh, you need $5 to get to school. Just that $5, they've gone to school that day, they've gotten an education. And that position really, like she was talking about education, it reminded me of this other quote by Dambudzo Marechera. He wrote in his book, he said, create education and you have created a false sense of inferiority. And this happens a lot. When you place a person with a degree versus a person who hasn't gotten a degree anymore, it makes it seem as if the other person is so much less. And what Africans really need to understand, especially in our context, because we don't have all of these resources, these big resources that all the first world countries have. We really need to look at the resource of the mind. What can I do with the mind that I have? Let's open that up. Let's have that type of conversation.
And talking about conversations, this is a conversation I usually have, and this is access to safe and dignified menstruation. Now, this is, of course, a fundamental need for women and girls, and this is something that we've also talked about here at ZT, and something that we've pushed for quite a bit. And so UNICEF envisions a world where every girl can learn, play, and safeguard her own health without experiencing stress, shame, or unnecessary boundaries to information or supplies during menstruation. Now, meeting the hygiene needs of all adolescent girls and women in all settings enables human rights, dignity, and public health. Now, this is something we've been talking a lot about, and we cannot talk about the plight of the girl without talking about this fundamental happening, a very beautiful blossoming of the woman, which sadly is seen as something by society, and especially by our traditions and our cultures, as something taboo or detestable. And yet this is another anchor that speaks towards how women and girls can realize themselves and be celebrated. It's a flower in bloom, and we are seeing gore, and we're seeing something negative. And this is something you guys are passionate about as UNICEF.
Yes, indeed. I think you can't talk girls without talking about a basic rite of passage, which for most girls is a reality. Menstruation, menstrual health and hygiene, and what it is that they need to be enabled or to be facilitated to manage that process with dignity. So the right to dignity says you need to have information, basic information about what's going on to my body, with my body, what's happening, what's this blood about, what do I do now that this is happening. And if you're a girl and you don't have that information, and you don't have menstrual material, it can result in what we call period poverty, where I might have other things, but I don't have those resources. And what then happens if you don't have those resources? You find a lot of girls then not going to school, because if I'm bleeding, how do I go to school? How do I walk out? How do I go to the water point?
And they lose a substantial number of days every month.
Girls can lose up to 5 days every month. And then you aggregate that over the year, it adds up to a lot. And for each period that you lose, you fall behind. And that results in a lot of problems, particularly for young girls. So, and then of course there's the stigma and the shame. So something happens, I have an accident, I spoil my uniform. We want to create an environment where no one laughs at the girl. The teacher knows what to do when an accident happens. The boy sitting next to me knows what to do when I have an accident. He can be my advocate. He can be my champion. He can say, well, look, you've actually had an accident. Here is my blazer. Can you go to whatever, the room where periods materials are kept, whether it's pads or menstrual cups or whatever. And then that process is managed. No one needs to feel shame. No one needs to be laughed at or bullied. And then, so that's part of what, as UNICEF, we are working on with our partners. We are investing in. Last year, we had the first ever formative study in Zimbabwe to look at countrywide, where are girls in menstruation? What taboos, what restrictions? So you'll find things like you can't cook, you can't go to church, you can't go to the mosque, or you can't show yourself in public, you can't play sports. If a girl is coming from that household that believes you can't play sport, how is she going to explain to a teacher that actually I can't run because my mom says I can't run when I'm having my menses? So how do we create a world starting from home to the community, to the school, where girls and women are enabled to manage these processes, which are natural processes.
And be themselves, because they're natural.
Be themselves.
And what are you guys doing to try and make that conversation, to start that conversation in society? I'll tell you, for example, that last year I was also part of a campaign. Sat with, we had this photo shoot. I was holding this pad with superimposed little red on it as if it's been used. And the conversation that it created, the noise, the madness on Twitter, but the fact that it was meant to shock, it caused this shock and awe, and these are men as part of that campaign, and it managed to change a bit of quite a lot, because even in my drawer, believe it or not, I then had pads from the drive and initiative, and time again you would have female work colleagues come and say, do you have a pad? And
we should normalize
that. We normalize that. And but how can we sustain that? Because, for example, that ran just touched a couple of nerves here and there. We also seem, when we're messaging, to be scared to say, you know what, we demand this. If you've got a problem with it, I'm absolutely sorry. Let's normalize having this conversation. What are you doing to make sure that we get to that point where we normalize and sustain?
So great. Thanks for asking that. So one of the successes that we scored was working with our colleagues in Parliament. We have some very great champions in Parliament, Honorable Misia Rangwe among others, who chairs the Parliamentary Portfolio on Education. So we worked closely with our colleagues in Parliament and other stakeholders to make sure that within the education, which is now the Education Act, we included clauses that mandate government to ensure the provision of menstrual materials in all our schools, particularly schools where there are resource constraints. We want to make sure that we normalize having menstrual materials at school, so that even girls who might otherwise not have from home are able, once they reach school, to access. So that's one conversation and one success that we can say, yes, at an institutional level, our government has thrown its weight and recognized that this is very important. So that's one. But at a community level, we are working with our partners, a whole range of them, and saying we need to start to shift the mindsets. So what you're talking about, triggering the shock, why should we be shocked? So what actions are we taking? We are taking communication actions. We're having conversations at community level, facilitated by experts. How do we talk about periods in a way that understands my concerns as a man, as a traditional leader, as a religious leader, meets me where I am, but moves me forward and says, okay, I have a daughter. How can I support her? I have a sister. How can she be supported? I'm a leader in my community. How can I create an environment where girls and women are supported? How can I pass policies that recognize that at marketplaces, women who sell need toilets, need to be changing them wasted menstrual materials. So there's a whole range of actions, and we are happy for champions like you, who at every opportunity that we get, we then flag the issue and say, let's continue the conversation. It should not only happen once.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I want to come back to you. You were in junior council, and these are conversations that you would have, but these are also conversations you would have with boys, and having them normalize understanding this and also becoming champions, and not even just champions or leading from the front, but it's enough just knowing what you're dealing with and understanding and being sensitive and empathetic. How did you communicate the issue of period poverty, especially in menstrual health awareness amongst your peers and also amongst other students when you were working as a student activist?
So when we were student activists during my term of council, we had a proportionality of, it was fairly equal, boys as to girls. However, the next year that came, the girls were 41 and the boys were 20. They were outnumbered. And that's the year that we finally got a female mayor. But in the year that I was running, we had a situation where the boys didn't even know. They were not aware. So when we talked about pads and menstrual health, and at first they were a little bit skeptical to say we're not supposed to be here right now. But after a while of us continuously talking about it and continuously talking about it, they kind of got the message to say we need to get involved.
Sometimes we need to sound like a broken
you really do. Repetition works. And so when we used to talk about it, so we had a conversation about it in chambers. And at first people, they were a little skeptical. They said, we don't really want to be part of this. But when we were now running the Million Pads campaign and raising pads for all of our wards, the boys had to get the pads. We said, we're not going anywhere. You go get the pads from where they are. And it was that situation where they were walking around holding pads at their school and them doing this and them doing the most. And after that, people were like, okay, so it's normal. I can hold a pack of pads. I can hold this and this and this and this. And I actually saw it not even with boys as well, but at my school when I was running the drive and, selling raffle tickets, me walking around with pads, the teachers almost had a fit. What's going on here? Why are you walking around with them? No, don't do that. I'm like, no. Just because you said that, I'm going to walk around with them until you get the point. And at first they were a little bit skeptical, but after a while they were just like, it's Nicole. We know she's this type of person. We need to get with the program. Everybody does this, and it was normalized. So I think we really had to talk. This is why it's so important for my voice to be heard, so that they can understand my plight and we can come together. When we talk about empowering girls, it's always this, the boys are being left out. It's at the expense of the boys. We want the boys as well. It's a 50-50 type of situation. So let's have the conversation.
And they can be part of the solution, really, by understanding. But of course, as we said, we're looking at International Day of the Girl, and it's a United Nations run program. So what better way than to actually hear the words to the world by the Director General of World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus.
Today is the International Day of the Girl, a day to celebrate the importance, power, and potential of girls around the world. Girls like Malala, Greta, Payal, Zulayaka, and Sophie have inspired millions with their courage to demand action on some of the world's most pressing issues. For each girl featured in the international news, we know there are countless others striving every day to improve their lives and futures and those of their communities. The health and well-being of girls is a priority for WHO. While much progress has been made in the last 2 decades, there is much still to do. For example, 12 million girls are married before age 18 each year. 1 in 5 girls globally has experienced sexual violence. In Eastern and Southern Africa, nearly 80% of new HIV infections among adolescents are among girls. We have to come together to improve the lives and health of girls. But girls themselves must be at the center of that effort. Girls are change makers, not only for their own health, but for the health of their families, communities, and societies.
Girls are change makers. Of course, that's at the heart of that message there coming from Tedros. And of course, we always tap into his intellect and his word time and time again here on Diplomatic Passport when we will be looking at issues, of course, around the various issues that we look at. Of course, this is always a daily weekday COVID-19 update show, but we always zero in on things that at the pulse of our nation and our world, and we're celebrating and commemorating International Day of the Girl. But another thing is violence and the family, violence against women. How is that being at the matrix of what you're doing as UNICEF, and what are the programs that you're working on with regards dealing with that?
Okay, so violence, I think everyone accepts and agrees that it's a very serious issue. Violence against women, but more so for us as UNICEF, violence against girls and children. So we have a range of programs that we, particularly in the light of COVID, where we've seen with the lockdown, there've been a worsening of incidents of violence against girls. Probably one of the issues is being locked down, the pressures, the increase in desperation and so on.
And sometimes you're locked up with, we're in lockdown with our abusers, with the people who are perpetrators, and we can't go anywhere, and we now have to have 24/7 with the people who actually are abusers, as opposed to the old normal where people just be one leaving the home and the other staying behind. But now we have to be 24/7 with one with the other.
For children in particular, I mean, most of the violence happens in the home. That's the bulk of the violence. And most of the sexual violence against girls is perpetrated by a non-perpetrator. So you can imagine in situations of lockdown, you are probably locked down with the person who's violating you. So we've invested a lot in terms of supporting and strengthening partners, providing a response. So Childline 116, that toll-free line where children can call at any time, and on the other end of the phone, help is waiting. We've also been working with the Msasa Project. They also have a toll-free line 4 women who are victims of gender-based violence. So it's a serious issue, particularly in light of COVID. So we've seen discussions, 38.5% increase in incidents of gender-based violence within the COVID period, what we're calling the COVID period. And that calls on all of us to kind of redouble our efforts. I mean, we're all doing a lot, but I think this needs us to just scale up a little bit more because it results in real suffering. So for children, you can be traumatized for life. For girls, you can get infected with HIV. You can get STIs. You can get pregnant. And then that ruins.
And we've got a lot of incidences of fistula, for example, that we're dealing with related to sexual violence.
Yes, and mortality. Because you're not physiologically developed, you'll find girls and adolescent girls and young women contributing about 30% to all our maternal deaths as a country. So it has very real consequences if we do not all step up. As Nicole was saying, it's a partnership. If we don't all step up and join hands and say no to violence.
Yeah, enough is enough. And a day, if I were to gift you a day on this planet with no male species, as it were, no men, it's just you, or just the girls, what would you do with that time? What would you do to change the world?
To change the world, I'm absolutely a fan of reading. I love reading. The more you read, the more your mind opens up to different possibilities and all these things. And I read a lot. And so if I was the only person, or me and the girls, I would probably just hold a reading festival, just sit down and we just read all of these books that we leave lying around just because we're so busy with our everyday lives, and some of us are mothers and some of us are this. But if we sit down and we just read a book and you say, okay, these words, what can they mean for me? You read a business book, you read all these books and you realize there's so much more to life. And I'm really worried, particularly with what's going on right now in this COVID situation, is that from an economic standpoint, our country was not at the best of terms before this COVID thing came. And then now, for us to reopen, we're reopening again. And remember, almost like 90% or like 80%, most of our people are in the informal trade business. And so how are you going to start informal trade with all these restrictions that are going on for us trying to keep this COVID thing happening? What is the get-go? Like, where's the startup coming from for all these people who are here? Because remember, all these houses have girls in them. They have mothers in them. They have little girls in them. And that situation, I really am worried as to how, as a nation, we're going to bounce back from this type of pandemic if before that we weren't at, a good level in the beginning.
And an interesting thing that she raises, because our economy, as it were, is really in the hands of women and girls. They contribute the most to our existence, to our being. And of course, as Nicole says, those women, those large pockets of women are in the informal sector, and they bore the brunt of the restrictions. Have you confronted that? Have you seen that as UNICEF? And going forward for the women and for the girls, because this also has educational implications, what new things did you need to confront as UNICEF? And going forward, how can we amplify her voice and her equal future?
So yes, this is something that has occupied our minds. As I said, our mandate is children. So we've had to look at what is the impact of COVID on children. And within the broad category of children, who are the most vulnerable. So our SDG agenda, Agenda 2030, says we must leave no one behind. And that calls on us to focus our attention on the least reached, on the one who's suffering the most disadvantage. So the impact of COVID on children, impact of COVID on education. So we've invested quite a lot, if you've been following, in terms of alternative ways of learning. How can we get radio programs?
Of course, I've been following. UNICEF is
yes.
our proud partners. I cannot. Wherever I look, I see UNICEF.
Yes. So radio lessons. We had to invest massively in the production of radio lessons as one of the ways to reach children who don't have access to Wi-Fi, for instance. So that's on education. In health, similar investments. How can we make sure that there's continuity of services? So girls continue to need services. Girls who are pregnant continue to need services. Girls who are unfortunately being violated continue to need access to health services.
Even more so today than they did in
Even
the past.
more so today. Girls continue to need access to justice. So we are working with our partners to make sure that services are continuing even during lockdown. And then looking ahead, doing the needful. So we've advocated for children to return to school because we know the more you're locked down, for instance, in situations of violence, the more vulnerable you are. For girls the world over, we've seen a pattern of girls being married off. So again, as a protective measure, can we get children back to school? Yes. The more children remain out of school, for girls, chances of them being reintegrated back into school lessen the longer out of school they remain.
Absolutely. Just perhaps to as we close off, Nicole, just in brief, your parting shots as we celebrate this very, very important day for women and girls across the world.
I think as a nation, we need to take this as seriously as possible. It's not just a girls' issue. This is 51% of the population. And you have statistics and figures where a part of us are disabled, a part of us are mothers at a young age, a part of us have already been given to marriage to another person. All of those statistics, they seem like numbers, but they're actual people. That's your sister, that's your mother, that's your cousin. And when you look at it like that, it's a really serious issue and we need to take it into consideration. It's not just about girls have a day and mothers have a day and women have a day. We've had a day because all these years we haven't been heard. And this is why we're saying my voice, our equal future. So that at the end of the day, if I raise my voice and I say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a boy can say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're all speaking the same language and we get to where we want to go faster. Because as a nation, we can only rise if we rise together. There is no way a boy can rise alone. There's no way a girl can rise alone, but we can all rise together.
Absolutely. We're stronger, always stronger together. Kathy.
You almost want to give a standing ovation. But I think just to emphasize, in Maud's story, Nicole's story, if you give girls the opportunity, we all stand to benefit. Yeah. So if you need any motivation and incentive, the voice, if you give girls a voice, if they participate, if we give girls the opportunity, we all stand to benefit. So absolutely. My voice, our equal future, we all are in it together.
Absolutely, and it's been an absolute pleasure having Maud and having the two of you, and this has been very riveting. And again, we would like to thank our sponsors, UNICEF, because these platforms are absolutely difficult to get ordinarily, and to support something this important and to give a voice to some people this important. And we also had other people saying, you know what, we also want you to sponsor these sort of shows and go diverse and go into women and girls in Binga, women and girls in Bulawayo, Mutare, out there, because there are a lot of voices that need to be amplified. Definitely. And certainly as Mpepers Television Network, we shall try and pursue that. And of course, with partners like UNICEF, how can we ever go wrong? My name is Robert Nkodiwa. This has been an interesting start to the week, and this has been an interesting start to Diplomatic Passport for this week, where we've had this new partner that's worked with us on a very important day of celebrating the International Day of the Girl, and that is UNICEF. And of course, they've been at the center of making sure that the lives of women, the lives of girls and children just in general are respected and are seen as fundamental to the growth of our country going forward, because we're trying to build a people of power and a nation of strength that will move through this land called Zimbabwe in power, and will glorify the nation and the flag under which we stand. Of course, my name has been Robert Mkondiwa. My guests have been in here. Maud, wherever you are, thank you so much for being with us. And from my TD, Obey, of course, we'll see you tomorrow. But we may have been celebrating and commemorating International Day of the Girl, but let's make every day a day of the girl, because equality is the only road that will take us into a bright and glorious future. Have a great night.